Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males. Today is Wednesday. It is the 29th of January. I have no idea how that happened, but time is moving, and we're getting ready for Parshas Bo. So I want to share with you. Hopefully, we'll have time today. I think it's three separate items on Parshas Bo. So let's see, let's jump right in. Parshas Bo begins, remember there's 10 plagues altogether. The first 7 occur in Parshas Va'era, so Parshas Bo contains the final 3. So it's picking up right on the heels of where Va'era ended. Va'era ended, the last plague in Va'era was Barad, the hail. And the hail had really done some serious damage. And the final 3 in this week's Parsha are Arbe, Hoshech, and then Makas Bechoros. So let's see, we're going to take a look at the last 2 psukim in Va'era, and then we're going to jump into the first pasuk in Bo. So the last 2 psukim in Va'era, which are at the result of Barad, the result of the plague of hail, it says, Vayar Paro saw ki chadal hamatar va'barad va'kolos, that all the terrible rain, hail, and thunderclaps, everything had ceased. Vayosef lachto, and he continued to sin. Vayachbed libo, and he strengthened his heart. Who's the he? It's lowercase. It's Paro. Paro strengthened his heart. Uvavadav. Next pasuk. Vayechazak lev Paro. Then Paro's heart was hardened.
No, that the Hebrew doesn't have an application.
Oh, good. So let's take a look at this next pasuk, because the next pasuk says Vayechazak lev Paro. And then Paro's heart was hardened. Now, if his heart was hardened, does that sound like that's his own doing? If his heart was hardened. So the way that some of the Rishonim, the way they explain these 2 psukim, the contrast is, in Lamed Daled, it's saying that, it said, Vayosef lachto, he continued to sin, and then Vayachbed libo, he himself hardened his heart. And then Lamed Hey, the next pasuk, Vayachazak lev Paro, then Hashem steps in and hardens his heart. The way this Sforno explains that is that, yeah, Paro had hardened his heart after Barad, but he could have waffled. He could have given in. It was still a very vulnerable time to make sure he didn't give in and that he stuck with that decision to keep his heart. God steps in. So Lamed Dalet is saying Paro hardens his own heart, and then in Lamed Hey, God steps in and does it. V'lo shilach es b'nei Yisrael kasher diber Hashem b'yad Moshe. Just like God had said it was going to play out, he would not send the Jews out. All of a sudden, the next chapter begins, and that's the next pasuk. This is the first pasuk of Va'era. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. I'm sorry, first pasuk of Bo. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. Bo al Paro. Go to Paro. Ki ani hichpadeti esli bo. I have hardened his heart. In order that I may place all these signs, all the plagues of mine in his midst. So I was bothered by a question last Shabbos, and I was so glad that I found someone who deals with it on this week's Parsha, and that's what we're going to jump into in a minute. But here's what bothered me last Shabbos. There's a Rashi that tells us, towards the beginning of the whole episode of Moshe and Paro, that we know there are 10 plagues in total. How many plagues did Paro harden his own heart for versus how many plagues did God harden his heart for? 5 and 5. Rashi tells us it's 5 and 5. That for the first 5, so that's Dam, Sfardea, Kinim, Orov, Deber, he made all the decisions on his own to be stubborn. And then Shchin is number 6. Starting with Shchin, God steps in and hardens his heart. If that's the case, that after number 5, the first 5 was him hardening his own heart, but the second 5 is God hardening his heart, then what's going on here at the end of Barad? Barad, what you saw there in Lamed Dalet and Lamed Hey, made it sound that Paro on his own decides, nah, I'm going to be stubborn, and then God steps in to reinforce that. Why is Paro having any autonomy at all at this point? This is after number 5. That's what was bothering me this past Shabbos. And then I saw someone who addresses it. So that's what I want to share with you today. So look at the bottom of page 1. We've shared a couple from him in the last months. This is Megid Yosef. This is Rabbi Yosef Saruskin. He's a grandson of Rabbi Zalman Sorotzkin of the Aznaim LaTorah. I keep meaning to check with one of my brothers in Israel who lives in Telstone, because there's a lot of Sorotskins in Telstone. I think he may still be alive, and I think he may be living in Telstone. He's probably older by now, but I keep meaning to check with one of my brothers, and I always forget. So God willing, I'll do that today. I'll send that email off. But anyhow, so let's see what Sorotzkin does here. He says, Ki ani ichbarati es libo leman shisio sosai ela bekirbo. So that's what he says. I've stepped in and I've hardened his heart because I want to have all these signs, these makos, take place in his midst, and that'll teach everyone a lesson. Isa b'medrash, the medrash taught us as follows: Amar Rabbi Yochanan, mikan pischon pel leminin, is that the apostates or anyone who wants to have complaints against God, they could always argue and say God's just not fair. This gives them an opening of a mouth. Lomar, they can say, Lo haisami menu shiasu tshuva. God's just so brutally unfair. He took away Paro's ability to do tshuva, and then he's punishing him. So that's just so unfair. That's what the Medrash opens up with that question. Amar le Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish answers. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are oftentimes sparring partners. They're a lot of times they're having their conversations or debates back and forth. So that was Rabbi Yochanan says, and Reish Lakish answers him, Yiston PM. Let their mouths be shut. In other words, they've got nothing to complain about. The way God works is He warns a person, Pam Aleph, Beis Gimel, 1, 2, 3 times. And what do we say? 3 strikes and you're out. So God will warn people 1, 2, 3 times, Veino Chozerbo, and if the person opts not to change their ways, who Noel Libo, Minat Shuva, God will sometimes close the door on the person's heart that they'll no longer have free will to decide to do tshuva. Why? In order to pay them back for all the terrible things they've done. At a certain point, 3 strikes and you're out. God will take away that bechira, that free will, which we say is one of the cornerstones of the way our world functions. Af kach paro harasha. The same applies to Paro, the evil Paro. Kivan sheshiger HaKadosh Baruch Hu chamisha pamim. God didn't just give him 3 tries; He gave him 5 tries, the first 5 plagues. V'lo hishkiach, and he didn't care. He didn't concern himself to correct his ways. So He gave him 5 opportunities. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ate kshisa erpacha. You chose to be so stiff-necked. And you hardened your own heart 5 times. I will add additional impurity upon your impurity. Then he refers you to the Rambam. Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, he deals with this as well, and so does Ramban, Nachmanides. This is everyone's question. How do you deal with the fact that Hashem seems to have taken away Paro's free will? So he's just quoted the Medrash so far. That's what Rav Sorotzkin did. He quoted the Medrash, and the Medrash tells us, and that's what Rashi quoted last week, is that the first 5, Paro was making his own decisions. The second 5, God hardened his heart. So he says, okay, in light of that Medrash, I was so glad to see this, that he was bothered by this. Miloshana Medrash, it comes out from the wording of this Medrash, it comes out, Chamisha Pa'amim. It said that God gave him 5 opportunities, and that's done. So 5 opportunities ends with Dever. After the plague of Dever, sounds like at that point, Paro should have no more free will. Mishtama sherak b'chamesh hamakos harishanos. That implies that it's only in the first 5 makos Paro chizek es libo mitoch bechira. Only in the first 5 did Paro harden his own heart based on his own free will. Achein b'maka shishis, starting with the 6th plague, which is shchen, ksiv ve'echazak Hashem es lev Paro. God hardened his heart. So that's what the Medrash is saying. Starting with Makkah number 6, God got involved, and Paro no longer has free will. Ulam, however, b'Makkah hashvis, with the 7th plague, which was Barad, which was at the end of last week's Parsha, in Va'era, Paro shuv chizek es libo. You see that what happened there? Paro hardened his own heart, mitoch bechira. Because it says in Pasuk Lamed Hey, Vayechazak lev Paro, that it says there, I'm sorry, that it says over there that he hardened his heart. Hadavar ta'un biur. This requires some explanation. If this is the way it works, is that after 5 he lost his free will. Why does he seem to have free will again? Notice, this seems to be what was bothering me, is that it seems with Barad that Paro still had some free will because it says that he chose not to. He hardens his own heart, and then God gets involved and hardens his heart. But it seems as if he still had free will. So what happened? He had full free will for number 1 through 5. 6, he lost it. 7, God gives it back to him and then takes it away. How do we understand that? So let's flip to page 2. And the top of page 2 is final paragraph. This is where he answers it. Hanira bezeh. So he says, how do I explain this? When we say that God took away his free will at the 6th plague of Shechin, why did God take away his free will at number 6? He was hoping that would be this massive wake-up call for Paro to say, oh my God, I had no ability to make a choice. And that would jolt him to do teshuvah. And there was the fact that imagine if you ever had that. Imagine you're driving and you just don't have the ability to turn the wheel. That would be a terrifying experience. And he's saying perhaps that's what happened, what Hashem was hoping was going to happen to Paro after Makkah number 6. After number 6, where he had no free will, and he basically was at the wheel, unable to make any personal decisions about turning it, that should have terrified him. And he says that should have shaken him up to the point where he would do tshuva. Now it's easy to see with the 6th plague, which was boils. He should have been filled with trembling, and he should have been filled with tons of regret after that plague came to an end. He said, oh my God, I never want to experience something like that, where I'm in a position to feel so frozen that I can't turn right or left. I have no choice. I don't ever want to be in such a position again. That should have rattled him to the core at plague number 6. And Hashem was hoping it did that, in fact. Therefore, plague number 7, which was Barad, HaKadosh Baruch hichzir leparo hasabechira. He temporarily returned to him that ability to make choices. Shema ka'esi sorer l'tshuva. He's given him one more chance, which is incredible because, again, the way he's learning this is he's saying, again, we always looked at it as after number 5, after 5 choices, boom, he's out of there. Okay, he's out of there, and that's why number 6 he didn't have a choice. But God still gave him a choice after 6, another chance. Hashem was thinking maybe it bothered him so much to have lived and been through an experience where he had no choices that would have rattled him to the core, and maybe that had shaken him up. And initially, there was an inkling. It actually did something. He said, "Chatasi apam." He said after the plague of Barad, when he got hit so badly, he did actually say, "Chatasi apam," I've sinned, but he didn't follow through anything with it. But as soon as the plague was taken away, Chazar Paro l'suro, he went back to his original nature, and he hardened his own heart. Therefore, God didn't give him any more chances after that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chazar l'chazek lev Paro b'yeser makos, and God hardens his heart for the rest. So this is actually very interesting. The way he's learning this is that he's saying, how do we make sense of this with the Medrash? The Medrash says he lost his ability after number 5. So he's saying, he did lose it after 5. That's why number 6, he had no ability. But God still gave him another chance. To me, this is amazing because it's saying, he's opening the door to saying how merciful God is. That, I always looked at that Medrash and said, okay, after 5 chances, 3 strikes, you're out. God went 5 strikes until he said you're out. But then he still gave him another chance. So you're right, for number 6, he was out. But he still gave him another chance. For number 7, he gave him another chance. When he showed there that he wasn't going to change, now, boom, that's it. He's done. So I think this is a very interesting approach. I was at least happy to see that he was bothered by the question. It's a good feeling when I find it's a great feeling when you've got something that's bothering you and you find someone else bothered by it. Otherwise, you might not be happy with his answer, but at least he was bothered by it. I'm not off my rocker. It's such a disheartening feeling when you think you've got such a good question and nobody else was bothered by this. With all the hundreds, thousands of years of commentary, nobody else was bothered by that. That might mean my question wasn't so good. So I think I found a lot of comfort in the fact that he was bothered by this, and I like his answer as well.
I'm a little confused on what it means when you say he had no ability to choose.
At which point? In Makkah number 6. Shechin.
I don't know what that means. Does that mean like he just didn't know whether he should let them go or not? Or
no, that he said no. He just answered no.
So he had an ability to choose.
No, he didn't. It wasn't his choice. he
Right, but how
said,
did he know it wasn't his choice? That's what I don't understand.
in other words, he must have felt, wow, that was weird. That no, we just had a week of this terrible plague of boils. Really was a miserable experience. Moses comes and says, let my people go. And I just said, no. I didn't even, what do you mean? Like, in my head, like, remember the old Tom and Jerry cartoons? They would have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. He says, like in my mind, I remember having this debate, but where did those words come from? I just kicked Moshe out and I said, no, like, what that was a crazy experience. It's as if like my choices were my ability to even voice something was taken from me. That's what Sorotsky's suggesting. That should have rattled him to the core. Like, what a terrifying experience. The way I'm thinking of it is like, imagine being behind the wheel and being unable to turn the wheel. That's got to be a terrifying experience.
Well, is it significant? Is every plague saying his servants? Like, I thought it was interesting. He kept repeating and his servants. Like,
Right.
what was the importance?
Yeah,
of
that
his
is
servants?
interesting. In other words,
I don't
if
know
he's
if
an
it's by every
absolute, if
plague.
he's an absolute monarch, who cares what his servants are? Like that.
But
That is
these
interesting.
two plague. I mean, it seems like.
Yeah, we'd have to look at the pattern of all 10. Does he mention the Avadim by the others? I'm not 100% sure. And also, what power did those Avadim have? Yeah, I'm not
Did
sure.
Paro's own thought about his, like in other words, when you're under the duress of the plague, you say, yes,
I want to get out of this.
see, I sinned.
Yeah,
But once the plague is gone, I mean, Hashem's got to know what's in his heart. We say that all the time.
Sure.
Hashem knows what's in our heart.
sure.
So if he's saying that he strengthened his own heart, then Hashem understands that he's really not sincere when he says chatasi.
Right. And he's shown that 5 times already.
Right.
Because most times he's told Moshe, like, well, this is bad. I'm gonna strike a deal, and then then he cancels on him,
And then you lose your Bechira altogether.
Yeah, and that's the way this measure sets it up, is that he gave him 5 opportunities. He said, no, that's it. We're not even going through this game anymore. I'm taking away your free will. But at Barad, which is number 7, it looks like there still was some free will. So that's what it's a very novel idea. What Rabbi Sorotsky's saying is that, yeah, when he totally took his free will away, that was number 6. He wanted to see how he felt about that, to give him one more opportunity. And at 7, he gave him that one more opportunity.
After 6, no?
No, it was after 7.
After
Barad is when he says Chatasi, Hashem Tzadik, Vani Ami Harishaim.
Right.
That was after Barad. And then immediately, as soon as the plague stops and he's not under that artillery barrage anymore, all of a sudden he says no. That's what, and he made that choice on his own, because remember the pasuk says
Right.
that he hardened his heart and then Hashem stepped in. So I think this is a beautiful approach of how to understand what exactly happened there. All right, let's see the second point. We're going to see a second point. This is also from the Maggid Yosef, from this Rabbi Yosef Sorotsky. So let's see. I thought this was a fascinating point. I've seen a lot on this Rashi before, and I think he articulated it very, very well. So here's this Rashi. Rashi is going on Moshe's warning Paro about the final plague, about the plague of Bakas Bechoros, the death of the firstborn. Vayomer Moshe says to Paro, Komar Hashem, so says God, Kachatzos halayla. What does it mean? What's the difference between the word bachatzos or kachatzos? Bachatzos would say when the clock strikes midnight. What's kachatzos? Around some point around midnight. Kachatzos alayla, some point around midnight. Ani yosef b'toch Mitzrayim. God says, I'm going to come out and I'm going to smite all the firstborns. So Rashi quotes the Medrash that picks up on this. It's actually a Gemara rather. So it says kachatzos alayla. So I cut out the first part of Rashi because it was going on something else. Rabbeinu Darshu, our rabbis darshan this as follows. Kimo kachatzi alayla. When he says kachatzos, he means somewhere around midnight. Amru, and this is the way Chazal, this is the way the sages explain. Why did Moshe use such verbiage? Shamar Moshe kachatzos. Moshe said kachatzos, somewhere around midnight. Shemashma, that implies samuchlo. It might be a little before midnight, might be a little after midnight. V'lo amar bachatzos, and he did not say at exact midnight. Why? Shemayitu atstenige paro. Maybe Paro's astrologers or whoever his wise men were around there. Maybe they would goof. Maybe their watches weren't exact. They wouldn't have atomic watches that were at exact time. V'yomru, and when they see, hey, look at that. My clock says midnight and there's still no plague. What'll they say? V'yomer Moshe badaihu. Moshe's a liar. Here it was. He told us that it's going to be at midnight, and it wasn't at midnight. So he's a liar. Doesn't pay to listen to him. Okay, let me ask you a simple question. And this is, I've heard a lot of people speak out this, Rashi. Let's say it comes a minute late. He still predicted it, and every firstborn is dead. Is there going to be someone out there saying, no, Moshe was a liar. He said midnight and it happened at 12:01. Do you think anyone's going to open their mouth like that? Yet this Gemara that Rashi's quoting is saying that's exactly what their reactions would have been. They were so intent on saying, we don't want to listen to Moshe, we don't want to believe Moshe, that it didn't make a difference how severe they got walloped. But if it was something that was even a minute different, that would give them grounds to just dismiss his entire message. And Moshe doesn't want that to happen. So he changes the wording. Even though God told him bachatzos, he gives the message kachatzos. I don't even want to give any grounds whatsoever for you guys to dismiss me. Because your watches might be a little off. God's going to strike exactly at midnight. But if I tell you that, you're looking at your watches, you astrologers of Paro, you might think that we're a little off and some of the message is going to go. But if I say somewhere around midnight, then regardless of how off your watches are, I'm correct. So that's what this Gemara is saying, which is just astonishing to say that this is the mindset of anyone. Anyone would sit there and say, Moshe is a liar. What do you mean? Did Makas Bechoros happen? Yes. Did every firstborn die? Yes, and then some. So why is he a liar? Because it happened at 12:01, and he said 12. Is anyone going to really do that? Apparently, yes. So let's see what Rabbi Sorotsky does with this. He says, Ko amar Hashem kachatzos halayla, so says God, around midnight, and yotze b'toch Mitzrayim. Rashi hevi midivrei Gemara. Rashi quotes the Gemara. Shamar Moshe, that Moshe used the verbiage of kachatzos. He says somewhere around midnight. The mashma samachlo, close to midnight. Olafanav, olacharav. It might be before midnight, it might be after midnight. V'lo amar bachatzos. He didn't say that. Shema yitu atztanige paro, because maybe his astrologers were off. Their watches weren't 100% right. V'yomer Moshe badaihu, and they'll say Moshe's a liar. Hadvarim tumuim biyoser. These words of the Gemara are astonishing. Sharei b'teisha hamakos hakodmim. Take into account, this isn't happening in a vacuum. There's already been 9 makos. Moshe hochiach shedevar Hashem befiv. Moshe's already proven. If you're going to say at this point, is Moshe a liar or is he truly the agent of God? I think he's got a pretty good track record at this point, after the last 9. V'kasher yomar keniyeh. Whatever he said, that's the way it plays itself out. Ben behavas hamaka, whether it was bringing the plague, ben besiluka, whether it was taking the plague away. The Afkan, and even here by this 10th, Makas Bechoros, be'etzem roim shemakas Bechoros magia kfi shomer Moshe. If it happens at 12:01, they're still seeing that the plague, this terrible plague, hit exactly like Moshe said. But according to their calculations of what time it was, it's not exact midnight. How can they possibly conclude and say Moshe's a liar? It happened. The last 9, everything went exactly like what he said. And this one, the plague happened exactly what he said. So because it's 12:01, wouldn't they rather arrive at the conclusion and say, must be Moshe's 100% emes and my watch is wrong? Yet it seems like what they're going to say is, no, I can't be wrong. Moshe's a liar. It's astonishing. All the evidence is there, but what's so hard for a person to do? To say, I'm wrong. I made a mistake. That seems to be the lesson here. That's what he's saying here. And we've all had this experience before. I know I sometimes laughed at myself, like when it just became abundantly clear. I'll give you a quick story before I go further. Layla and I were one of the first years we were married, so we have cousins who live in Teaneck, and they were making a bar mitzvah for one of their kids. And it must have been right after the clock changed, either in the fall or the spring. I don't remember which one it was. I guess I just never changed my watch. Maybe it's a watch that I just wore for Shabbos, so I just didn't change it during the week. I don't know what it was. So we go to the house. Let's say davening is called for 9 o'clock. So the house, we were staying at some neighbors of theirs, and we get up in the morning, and I like, oh my gosh, overslept. We gotta go because the davening starting at 9. So I get Layla up. She's getting all dressed. We're all dressed, and we come out. And they're sitting at the kitchen table is the father. He's still kind of in his bathrobe and sweatpants, and he's studying bar mitzvah lessons with a kid. And we're looking at our watch. It's like 5 minutes to 9. What's wrong with these people? And they say, "Hey, do you want a coffee?" And we gotta go. We gotta go. It must have been fall because what happened obviously was my watch was still on the right time, and they had all fallen by, and every indication was there that it was my watch was the problem. And I'm looking around the kitchen, and all their clocks say 7:50. And my wife, and in my mind, I'm saying, "What's wrong with this family? All their clocks are wrong." That was my reaction. Like on the microwave, on the oven, on the wall, all their clocks are wrong. And the father's just sitting here, like every indication was there. It's saying, "No, Males, it's your watch." It wasn't that. But like it took me like a good 5 minutes of panic until I finally said, "Oh my God!" And I remember laughing at myself. And Layla was laughing at me too, saying, "You hurried me up. You made me get up. You made me get dressed. You wouldn't let me have a coffee." And like everything. It was a funny scene. But I remember, so afterwards, we were analyzing this as I walked to shul. I said, "What happened?" I said, "This is a classic example of this. It is so much easier to say everybody else is wrong, everybody else has made mistakes, and I'm the one normal person, instead of saying everybody else is right and I blew it." Human nature is we're just the way we're hardwired. Is we'll say, regardless of the evidence, I have to be right. I trust myself. I believe in me, so I have to be right. Don't confuse me with all this evidence that's out there. I must be right. So I'm panicking. Like we got a cousin's bar mitzvah to go to. What are you sitting here for? We don't know. And that was what's happening. So anyhow, he's going to say that's exactly what was going on here. All the evidence is there to indicate that Moshe's MS. Moshe's right. The first 9 makos, everything went like you said, both coming and going. This one, did everyone die? Yes. But okay, it happened at 12:01. Maybe it means Paro's astrologers, your watches aren't right. No, Moshe's a liar. My watch is always right. That's what it says. So that's what he says here. Let's see what he goes. We're about 5 lines from the bottom, in the middle of the line. Vine Evan Ezra Kasav. The Evan Ezra says here, "V'yadua ki ein yecholas b'chacham leidar rega chatzi hayom." No matter how wise a person is, they can never figure out the exact point of midday. Kim b'torach gadol b'kelim gadolim. You have to have big mechanisms and machines. Shel nechoshes. He's basically saying watches. That's what he's saying here. And even though kasha, and midnight's even more difficult than midday, because midday at least you have a sun to gauge with, you can use sundials. Midnight's even tougher. So don't they know that? Don't they know it's very hard to accurately know when midnight is? In Cain, Yoser Mistaber, it would have made a lot more sense. Litlos es I hadiyuk b'toshalem. Wouldn't it have been a much more logical conclusion for these astrologers to say, we must be wrong, Moshe's in the right? It's impossible for humans, especially before modern, watches, to figure out when exactly midnight is. So why on earth would they conclude that Moshe's the liar? So now we're on the top of page 3. So he says, Amnam, what do you see? Nira, it seems from all this, one of the strongest emotions and urges that a human being has, who hayetzer lios tzodek, is the desire to be correct. I have to be correct. It's me. This is me we're talking about. Come on, I believe in myself. I believe in my capabilities. I must be right. Vim Yehuda Hagadol Shebeshvatim. If Yehuda, who was the greatest of all the Shvatim, Niskaber Lomar, he found the massive strength to say about Tamar. He said about her Tzadka Mimeni. She's more righteous than me. I blew it, and he finally realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. She's more righteous than me. And according to the commentaries, that gave him the merit to have kings, meaning that ability to say I blew it. That was a huge nisayon. In Cain Lo ben Akel, if it was so hard for Yehuda and he passed this massive test, in Cain Lo ben Akel Melech Rasha Keparo Yoda. If it was such a nisayon for Yehuda to admit he made a mistake, could you imagine how much more difficult it must have been for Paro, such a wicked fellow, to admit he made a mistake? Shu Omed Barosh Malchus Rasha. Not only is he a wicked guy, but he's at the top of the pyramid. Ooh, no pun intended. He's at the top of the pyramid of an entire kingdom of Rishaim. I have to look that up. That's some good modern Hebrew. And they would have to conclude to say I'm wrong means the way we treated the Jews for the last couple hundred years was a crime against humanity. In other words, you realize what it is for them to say they're wrong? It's not just I was wrong about this. I'm wrong about everything. Enslaving them and all that. To admit they're wrong means for the last 200 years, everything we've been doing, working them to the bone like this has been and the terrible killings of kids. This has all been a massive crime against humanity. They are so biased in their thinking, they've got to come up with any reason to blame this mistake on Moshe. It can't be us. And in order to avoid that realization of just how wrong they were, and what does that mean? They were wrong about everything. They have to come up with another answer, even if it's as preposterous as saying Moshe must be a liar. Hakoshi lahodos shechet, the difficultness that it takes, how difficult it is to admit that a person sinned, that I made a mistake. Yachol lahovil gam imra megucheches k'Moshe badai. It could even lead someone to say something so preposterous as Moshe must be a liar. The same way I was sitting in that kitchen in Teaneck saying something's wrong with this family. All their clocks are wrong. Their microwave clock's wrong. The wall clock is wrong. The oven clock is wrong. The father's in his pajamas studying for the bar mitzvah parsha with the kid when it's 5 minutes to shul. I can say all that evidence. They're making a terrible mistake because I'm right. I was laughing at myself on the way to shul. I couldn't believe this would happen. This is exactly what happened. And I think there are times in life we'll all do this. It's a trap we'll fall into because as he says, one of our strongest impulses within us is to say, I must be right. How can I be wrong? I'm such a smart person. I'm such a smart cookie. I make such good decisions. How can I be wrong? So it's so hard to admit that. No, I blew it. I'm mortal just like everyone else. I blew it. It's hard. And he says, if we're not on the lookout, we could do something as silly as this. Look at this last paragraph. I think this is so interesting what he does in this last paragraph. Goes now taking this all into account of just how proud they were and how difficult it is to admit that they made a mistake. So he says, what must have been the most difficult punishment, the hardest punishment for the Egyptians to bear? Ulai niten lomar, maybe you could even say, I thought this was such an interesting poetic line. Hamaka achas esrei. He says, I'll even call this the 11th plague that they got. He says, what might have been the 11th plague that the Mitzrayim had? Shasof davar, that at the end of this whole saga, Naltzu lahodos alames, they were forced to admit the truth. After Kriyas Yamsuf, what were they forced to say? They were forced to say that Hashem hu Elokim. That must have been the biggest blow to them because that's hitting their ego. Everything else is hitting, their possessions and whatnot. Now hitting the ego. Once we know that the ego, that is so strong, he says in a certain sense, that was the 11th makkah, that they had to verbalize it. And he says here, Moshe Amar LaParo, Moshe said to Paro, Laman Tedu'un, we are doing this so that you will know. Shezuma Terasa Shal Makas Bechoros. That was the whole point of Makas Bechoros, that Paro will finally get slapped into submission and he'll admit all this. Achein Isa b'Yerushalmi, the Gemara Yerushalmi says in Psachim, Amar Reb Levi, Kashem shenitem koach b'kolo shel Moshe. The same way God gave power to Moshe's voice, I think this is talking about a Kriyas Yamsuf at the splitting of the sea. Kach nitin koach b'kolo shel Paro. He also gave strength to Paro's voice to be able to articulate what was he thinking. Umaya Omer, what did he say? Kumu tzu mitoch ami. He said, Paro said, when he finally throws them out, get up and leave my people, get out of my nation. Paro, that according to the Yerushalmi, says, in the past, you were the slaves of Paro. From this point on, you are servants of God. You are not my servants anymore. And also when it came to the splitting of the sea, it says, V'yadu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. The Mitzrayim, they will know that I am God. V'achein sof davar Paro Amar. Paro actually said it then. Mi kamocha nehadar b'kodesh. That's the way they learn it. Then in the Az Yashir, when it says Mi kamocha nehadar b'kodesh, Kedisa Pirkei Rebbe Lazar. He's being forced to finally admit that this is a holy nation and they are servants of God and God Almighty runs the world. So he's saying that in a certain sense, you might call it the 11th plague, that they were forced to come to terms with this and to recognize the folly of their ways and to finally recognize that they're not as smart as they think they were and to finally submit to God. He poetically calls that the 11th plague. But be that as it may, I think this is, I think the way he articulated this was just very, very nice. And again, I thought back to that incident in Teaneck, and I think we all have incidents like that in our life that we could look at it. And it's comical in the end when we look back and we say, like, where did I get that sense of that sense of righteousness from? Like, where did I get that from? That I thought I was absolutely, absolutely correct like that. Well, I have a friend that every year when I get to Parsha Shmos and I'm going over the Parsha, I'll take a screenshot of like a certain pasuk and I'll send it to him. And I don't even have to say anything. It's because it's been going on for like 30 years now. The story was this probably in like 1992 or 93. I remember this friend of mine, he was in yeshiva, and they would always have, same thing goes on here, that the yeshivas come from Israel, so they'll go around the country recruiting in boys' high schools, girls' high schools too. They'll go around. So there was a Rosh Yeshiva from one of the yeshivas in Israel. He was coming around, and my friend loved to like talk with them. And like he was already in the base medrash program, he wasn't going, but if they're already here, like he would want to share a Divrei Torah and hear something he had to say. So they were standing, and at that time, the Aron had a parochas on it, and had a picture of the burning bush from Parshas Shmos, and it said Vasna Einenu Ukal. So it's spelled. There was no nekudos on the parochas, but that if you look in the Chumash, it's Asna Einenu Ukol, not a uchol with a chaf, but rather ukol with a kaf. That's how it is in the Chumash. So my friend must have, or this rabbi must have been telling my friend a Dvar Torah having to do with this parochas, having to do with that pasuk that comes out of burning bush. And the rabbi, again, this is someone, I don't know how old he was. I'm assuming he was in his 50s or 60s. He's telling my friend this Dvar Torah, and he says to him, yeah, Vasna ukol. And my friend looks at the parochas. There's no nekudos on the parochas, and he actually corrects him. Oh yeah, you mean the pasuk there? Hasnei uchol. So the rabbi kind of looks at him and he tells him again, yeah, hasnei uchol. This one like 3-4 times. My friend keeps correcting him, and, like thinking like I'm right. And the rabbi is like, and then finally he tells him his whole Torah. And I remember I was chavrusas with him, so he comes back to his seat at the base marriage, and instead of just coming right back to his Gemara, he tells him, "Males, 1 second." He takes a chumash, and I see he's going to Parshas Shmos. He's looking it up, and he goes, "Oh my God!" He hits his head. I said, "What happened?" He tells me what happened. He goes, "Could you believe this?" He goes, I corrected him like 3-4 times, telling him that he's wrong. I must be right. I have to be right. That's every time I look at it. It's Esnain and Uchol." He goes, "And why did it never dawn on me that maybe this man knows a little bit more Torah than I do? Maybe he's saying the pasuk correctly." And we got such a good laugh out of that. Every year, I should say just about every year since then, when I'm going over the Parshas Shmos, I'll hit that right away. I think of my friend, and like, I know this year right away, I'll take a screenshot. I don't even send a message. I just send it to him, and I'll say, "Thinking of you," whatever it is, I'll say, and then I'll circle it. I'll say, "Ukol," or sometimes I'll have a voice note saying, "Can you just remind me again? We're getting at that part. Is it Uchol or Ukol? I forget, I have a fun time with it. But anyway, we all have these moments in life, and I think it'll just hit us. It's the way we're hardwired, and we have to take a step back and say, I might not be just that all-capable, all-thinking, all-knowing person that I think I am. I have to open myself up to the possibility I might be the one who's making a mistake here. All right, I want to share one last Dvar Torah with you. So this is towards the end of the Parsha. So we get the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. So Pidyon Haben, so this is when there's a Bechor, when there's a firstborn male, so there's a sense of Kedusha on this male, and this it has to be redeemed. So we've looked at a couple of things from this sefer before. We've seen in the past this Rabbi Shlomo Margolis. Again, he was a student of the Navardik Yeshiva in Europe before the Holocaust. He made it to America. He was a rabbi in Boston for many years. And I don't remember how, but I read something about him the other year, and I found this sefer. And every now and then I'll just look at it and see, does he have anything nice on the Parsha this week? I saw something very nice that triggered my memory. Maybe remember something else that's going to knock your socks off. So let's see this. So it says, so every firstborn of whether it's a son of Bnei Yisrael or where it's the firstborn of a kosher animal is going to have the status of Kedusha status to it. And if you want to take that away, you have to redeem it. Basically, that's what we're going to see. So the whole concept of Pidyon Haben, you see come up at the end of this Parsha. So here's where Rabbi Margolis says. It says, Kadosh Likol Bechor Peter Rechem. Kedusha Social Bechor, this Kedusha, the sanctity that a firstborn has, he lilo hachana v'hachshara rak mirechem imo. There's really nothing that this baby did to earn this Kedusha. It's innate. It comes to this child from the womb. In other words, that firstborn automatically has this Kedusha. It's not that they worked for it, they didn't earn it. It's gifted to them as a firstborn. They got it from the womb. He says, B'halacha Matzina, we find the following halacha. Shakoin Shoel, if you ever listen closely or read the text at a Pidyon Haben, there's a very funny conversation that takes place. The Kohen asks the father, "Tell me, what would you rather? Do you want me to basically leave with the kid, or would you like to take the kid and I'll take the 5 silver coins?" And the father always says back, "I've yet to be at a Pidyon Haben where anything happened different." He says back, "I'd like the kid and you could have the coins." Okay, so he says, "Ba'alacha matzino." He says, "We find the following halacha: Shakoin Shoel Abba." The Kohen asked the dad, "But my boys, what would you prefer? Bincha b'chorcha, your firstborn son, the Abba Meshiv," and the father always answers back, "Bini b'chori, I want my firstborn son." Vehelach, and here in exchange, here are some coins or some silver. So She'elas HaKohen Te'una Hezber. We really have to understand what's this question that the Kohen's asking. Kivan Shatinok Nolad, since you have this little baby who was born, Noladim Kedusha Merachem, was infused automatically with some kind of Kedusha. Amayot Sil L'chulin Al Yidei Pidyon. Almost like, what right do you have to just say, I'm giving you this option. This kid right now has Kedusha. What do you want? Do you want the kid to keep the Kedusha, or do you want to take the Kedusha away? Like, what right do we really have to take that Kedusha away? He has some Kedusha, he has some sanctity. And what right does the father have to say, no, yeah, don't need that Kedusha, I want the kid? What do you mean? The kid's Kadosh right now. What right do we have to just cavalierly dismiss that Kedusha? So he says, Efshar Lomar. So he says, here's what I was thinking. You can possibly say, Shah Kavana B'Shela, what's really going on? What's really the question? HaKavana B'Shela, my boy's Tfei, when the Kohen asks, what do you prefer more? What he's really saying is, Bama Rotza Ha'av, Him Lashiro B'Kedusha Azu, do you choose, would you rather have your kid remain with this Kedusha that he was born with, Sheba Mela, that just came on its own. He didn't earn, he didn't work for it. But it was just gifted to him by God. He never had to work for it in his life. And the father says back, I want my kid to be holy, but not this kind of holiness. Ani rotze shakedusha tavo alav rak al yidei kinyan v'yagia atzmis. I want my kid to earn his kedusha. That's really what the father. The whole question was never, do you want your kid to stay sanctified or just lose that? Because then it's like it's something's wrong about that. The kid has kedusha. Why would we just cavalierly just saying get rid of the kedusha? And the father says, yeah, I don't want that. So he's saying, I think there's something bigger going on here. What the Kohen is asking is, your kid is kadosh, and we want this kid to remain kadosh. The question is, what type of kedusha do you want this kid to have? Something that he was born with that he never had to work for? Or do you want to work with this child to help this child live a sanctified life, and this child will earn a sense of kedusha? Rak al yidei chinuch, and that comes through education. And is that why you want to redeem him? You want to redeem him because you want to work with him to make this kid earn it? And he says, that the kid should earn that sanctity. He's saying that's the conversation. It's a beautiful twist on it. He's saying that's what's going on here. And then he says, he says, I heard a beautiful story about one of the sages of Israel. Two Jewish businessmen came to him, two merchants. They had a very complicated did Torah. It was a financial affair. It was all entangled. And they come to this rabbi, make sense of it, tell us what the halacha is. He says, I can't answer this right away. It is complicated. I got to look stuff up. He says, okay, come back to me in a couple hours, a couple days, whatever it is. I got to do some homework. This is a complicated shaila. So what did the two guys do? They wanted an answer, and he didn't answer, so they left. And they went to another rabbi, someone who was serving as a rabbi in a different area. And he went into his base medrash, and he immediately came out. Boom! Here's the answer. And since these two guys never returned back to the first rabbi, when the rabbi finally did his homework and looked up what the halacha was, he went into town looking for them. And when he finally found them, so Siprulo, they told him, no, we don't need your rabbi anymore. We already got a very clear directive from another rabbi. And this rabbi was shocked. Who could have given you such a quick answer? That was such a complicated question. And he says back, last paragraph, top page 4, Heshivu, so they answer him back, Sharav Ploni, B'makum Ploni, a certain rabbi at a certain address, who's that Shechriya B'din Torah Shalom? He answered it very clearly for us and quickly. Misha Shama al Kach, when the rabbi heard this, that wow, this must be a genius, that he instantly came up with this. Misha Shama al Kach, Amar Shehu Chayav Ladas, Miwas Arav. Who is this rabbi? Shavadai Gon Atzum, he must be a towering sage. Im Yachal Lifsok, if he was able to so instantly come up with such a good answer. Kishabala Fanav, so the rabbi finds out who he is, and he goes to him. And he says, Shalo, he asked him, Hey Yachal Lifsok Kol Kach Mahera, how did you have such a quick answer on such a complicated question? But Mashalo Yochel Hulakrio, something I couldn't, I had to spend a long time going through all the sources coming to an answer. And here's what the rabbi answered him. He goes, here's what I did. I went into my room, my study room. I poured out my heart in prayer to God. God, help me here. This is a complicated shaila. Help me out. And it looks like my prayers were answered. I opened the books to the right places, and I found something that was exactly like it, and that's how I answered him. And when the first rabbi heard that that's what happened, he turned back. He says, here I was coming to meet you because I thought you were such a massive sage. And now that you tell me you basically did something miraculous like this happened. So he says, I'm not looking for any kind of Torah that comes with tricks and any kind of special stuff like that. I'm only looking for Torah because the people who worked really hard and perspired and had to really rack their brains. That's what those are the kind of people that I admire. This is a miracle happened here. This is no big shakes. So basically, here I was thinking that I was coming to meet this massive holy person. That's really no big shakes. What really impressed me would have you would have told me that you worked really hard and you had mastered this area of Torah study, because that would have been it. I thought that was a very interesting thing. And Rabbi Margolis is using that to say back about his piece about the pigeon aban, that's what's going on, is that the Kohen's asking the father, granted, your kid has some Kedusha now, that was inborn. He didn't do anything to earn that. He got that as being the firstborn. Do you want him to keep that Kedusha, or do you want something more special than that? Do you want Kedusha that he's going to have to work for? To which the father says, yeah, that's what I aspire for. I aspire for Kedusha that a kid had to earn on his own and put in the hard work, the toil, and challenges, trials, error, failure, and then to come out ahead. That's what I want. And that's the toil. That's what I want him to get. I think it's a beautiful spin on that. We're not going to have time to see this inside, but I just have to tell you something absolutely wild. This jogs my memory. And with this thing with Rabbi Margolis, and it's here. This is something from Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Reb Chaim Volozhiner was the founder of the Volozhin Yeshiva. He was also the primary student of the Vilna Gaon. And there's something he writes in an introduction that it's mind-boggling. It's right here. This is a sefer. One of the Vilna Gaon didn't write too many Sfarim. He mastered every aspect of Torah, both revealed Torah and Kabbalah, everything. He himself didn't sit down to pen too many Sfarim. After he died, he did pen some, but after he died, some of his notes were used, to put out more, and his students wrote down what they had heard from him. But one of the things that the Gra actually did write was a commentary to a Kabbalistic work that was called Safra or Sefer Ditzniusa. I have no idea what this book is about. It's a Kabbalah Sefer called Sefer Ditzniusa. I have no idea what it's about. The Gra had mastered everything, including Kabbalah. In the introduction to this work that his children published of the Gra's perished for Sefer Tznusa, you wonder, what kind of market is there for this? How many people said it? But they chose to publish it. So in the introduction, Rav Chaim Volozhiner wrote an appreciation of a student of the Vilna Gaon, writing all about the Vilna Gaon. And he says, I want to tell you something about my Rabbi. I want to tell you something about the Vilna Gaon. He treasured more than anything putting in the hard work, the toil, the perspiration to work a problem out. There was nothing that he valued more than Torah. He had to work hard for it, really rack his brains and work for it. And he goes, I am telling you something that he told me on several occasions. He says, on several occasions, I was visited, he's saying this from the Vilna Gaon, I was visited by Magidim. We say the word a magid. A magid means someone like, Rabbi Kron. He should have a refuah shlema. He's a magid. He's a good speaker. In Kabbalistic terms, when we say a magid, it means something a little different. It means like an angel or something that basically I want to reveal to you some of the Torah. You're working on something and you're keep hitting brick walls. I was sent from on high in the heavens to share something with you. Or wow, you did so many zechus and mitzvahs. What can we share with this person who really appreciates Torah? I want to share with you a secret Torah thought. And there's farm that are out there that have been written, basically people saying about different ideas that were shared to them by Magidim. There are such swarm out there. So Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes in this introduction to this Kabbalistic work, he says, I want to tell you something about the Vilna Gaon. He told me that on multiple occasions in his life, he was visited by Magidim. And you know what his reaction was? He shut the door in their face. He said, I'm not interested in the word you have to say. He had this supernatural experience being visited by Magidim saying, we want it. He says, I'm not interested. Unless I have to rack my brains, unless I have to work on it, I'm just not interested. And he basically shut the door. He didn't want to hear what they had to say, didn't want to learn anything from them. And Rav Chaim Volozhiner was using this to say about what does it mean to be amel, to work on Torah, and it should just be superficial work. He says, he goes, the Vilna Gaon told me this on several occasions. This happened to him over the course of his life. And he even goes on to say in this paragraph, he once sent me a letter that he goes, he knows that one of my brothers, he has a brother who was also a student of the Vilna Gaon, that was, I don't know if he knew that he had been racking his brain and kept hitting a brick wall. So maybe the Vilna Gaon thought he might be visited by a Magid. He says, tell this to your brother, turn him down also, keep working, keep plugging away. That's the Torah that has value, true value there. It's something absolutely wild. And if it wasn't for Rav Chaim Volozhiner testifying this, I'd look at this and say, what do you, come on, what do you tell me these bubba mices or something here? There is testifying that there's something. What's that? Yeah.
Admitted
that he was visited by a Magid every now and then. Rav Yosef Karo too. There's a whole sefer called Magid Mesharim that basically has stuff that his Magid shared with him. And, yeah, but it just made me think of this because again, here it is that Rabbi Margolis was saying his little twist on what a Pidyon Haben is all about, and then that story about the rabbi saying, "Oh, now I'm not impressed anymore, and I'm not, I got nothing to learn from you because you didn't get this from hard work." And here it is. This falls into this school of thought of the Rav Chaim Volozhiner Vilna Gaon school of thought that unless it came based on someone's own toil and their own hard work and perspiration, it didn't have anywhere near that same value. And that just jogged my memory there. Okay, so I hope these are a couple items that can enhance our Parshas Bo, and I hope this is something that you could enjoy. All right, I want to wish everyone a good day. Wish everyone a good day, and really, let me just stop the recording, and then if anyone has anything that they want to add, please